Thank you very much for joining us today. My name is Marian White, and with me is my co-host of Larchmont Today for at least the last 15 years, Ken Bialo. Can you believe we've been television stars for that long?
Yes, talent will show.
Ken, of course, was mayor in the village of Larchmont for 4 years and served as trustee on the Larchmont Village Board for 11.
4 of which were with you.
Yes, and that's a lot of volunteer hours, I must say. And we have our favorite guest with us, Mike Weiner. Mike served as trustee on the Larchmont Village Board for 5 years, has been a volunteer fireman in the village of Larchmont for over 30, and was the volunteer chief of the Larchmont Village Fire Department for 3 years. And that's an awful lot of volunteer hours.
Too many. Good evening, everyone.
Well, it's great to see you. We have the classic Yankees-Mets rivalry.
No.
I see.
No.
Yankees minor league, maybe.
No.
Well, both teams sucked in the beginning of the summer, so
Well,
it started out on fair ground.
whatever it is, that's been changed. That has been changed. My Yankees are doodling along.
Well, we'll be getting on to football soon.
Yes. Did
Here-
Beltran play today, by the way, or is he playing tonight?
I don't know.
Doesn't know. Okay.
I've given up watching.
Stray question. Just a stray
I've just
question.
given up watching, because it's. I went through the AAA team, the AA team, and I didn't know the single A team.
Is Luis Castillo a surprise or what?
Yeah.
He is a surprise, and he's turned out to be a good player. And he wouldn't have gotten a chance if the regular lineup had stayed in place.
Now that we're back to business, the summer's over, unfortunately, or at least the school year has begun. We have quite a few heavy gratis topics, so it's sort of fitting for getting back in the groove. So I know one of the things we've talked about for...
Like, let's not say a word.
I know we do that for half an hour.
That would make a really long show.
Called dead air.
Well, I want to go back to one of our favorite subjects for the last year, or maybe even longer, which is the turf field in Flint Park. Because I think, Mike, didn't you say something has caused you new concern?
Yeah, when they built Flint Park, they put a nice path around it, which I've put into my evening jog. And now, when I go by the turf field, I've been watching people play on it, and quite often I've noticed that many of the people on it are actually using regular cleats, which will tear up the turf field very quickly.
So its regular life expectancy from 9 or 10 years down some.
Down quite a bit. As we all know, and as we take our children into the different sports authorities, et cetera, to buy their cleats for the fall, you now see the whole new section called turf shoes. You're supposed to wear either turf shoes or sneakers.
Wow.
Instead of cleats, because the cleats grind up the polypropylene or whatever that stuff is made of, and reduces its useful life. And remember, it costs $1 million and change. Well, a couple of years ago, the estimate was it would cost $1 million to replace the field, which has to be done every 9 or 10 years. I don't know what it'll wind up costing 4 or 5 years from now.
And we'll have to pay for it now.
Well, unless you can find somebody else to pay for it. If you live in Larchmont, you'll be paying.
There was talk when this field was first put in that we'd have attendants to watch it and all that, from the tennis side. The same attendant would do both. I think this is a concern that we have to get people to look at and make sure that no matter what you feel about the field, that we take care of our assets in the proper manner.
Oh,
and that basically means is that we have to play with sneakers or turf shoes instead of cleats.
They can't lock the field in some way?
They do lock the field.
It's supposed to be locked, but when you bring a whole bunch of people on and someone doesn't bring the right shoes, someone's got to be policing it to say we can't play if you only have cleats. You have to, and the thing is, sneakers work.
Well, I don't know. There's all that crumbly stuff in there. They were supposed to be. Remember, there was the big promise when all this went in. They promised the environmental people that they were going to monitor the runoff of the crumbs.
Right.
And Catherine Walks went into the village board meeting. I don't know, it was a couple months ago, and said, "You haven't done a thing. Zero. Oh, again. We promise. We promise. We promise." Who knows? They just don't take very good care of the field.
Yeah, I think it's a very important thing, and for all the people watching, let's make sure that, we do it ourselves.
Now, is this in daylight when people are using it? Are they using it after dark or what?
Well, I don't run at night, so.
Oh, okay, so it is daylight.
I don't want to be
okay.
hit by a car.
Thank you for that, Mike. We need you every month when you're available. So they said there would be an attendant, and I guess there was during the summer. I saw a tennis attendant. Not that the tennis attendant was looking at the turf field.
Yeah.
I don't know how you do it. I think at the very least is that we have to make sure that the leagues and the associations do the appropriate policing themselves and realize that you can't have inappropriate gear for those fields. If you go by Chatsworth School, we see all the signs at Chatsworth on what you can or cannot do. Maybe
Right.
we need to put signs in Flint Park. I don't know what the answer is, but it needs to be addressed.
Well, it was a hateful idea to begin with, and it's still a hateful idea. And the sooner it gets pulled out, the happier I'll be.
Becoming more expensive for all of us
Well, it will be.
that live here. Okay, well, that's very interesting. Keep us posted, okay?
Oh, I will.
Yeah, you're charged with investigating.
The next topic was something you also brought up, is having to do with the New Rochelle Fire Department.
Yeah, I went to Stop and Shop one day and I saw all these signs, protect the New Rochelle firemen, stop their layoffs. And I said, what's going on? Did some research. And due to the financial issues affecting the city of New Rochelle, they're looking to cut back their fire department. And they're looking for numbers up to 16 firefighters they want to reduce from their roles. Whether they do it through attrition or layoffs is still being researched. But we're talking about a fire department that is a very busy fire department.
Do you know how large it is?
It's 165.
Yeah, it was
See,
165.
yeah.
I think it's actually down a little bit now.
So this would
Okay.
be 10%, roughly 10%
Okay.
plus or minus.
Okay.
So it's a significant cut to them. And as we know, Larchmont depends on New Rochelle as well to provide mutual aid to help Larchmont out in times of need. And it's going to be even more difficult with the loss of 16. We were talking previously about the consolidation study of the South County.
Yes.
Yep.
Now this will impact that because all those numbers were premised on all the fire departments staying at full size
Oh, and growing.
and growing.
And growing. We were going to, the Larchmont Fire Department was going to grow to what, 16 paid staff?
So-
I'm sorry, 48 paid staff?
What?
The numbers, do you remember the number was the standing? We had 15, 16 paid staff now?
They were going to because they were going to run a full
Yeah, we're gonna run
full complement of an engine out of Larchmont all the time.
Yeah.
So this is something I think we all need to keep in mind, and this is whole part of what we were saying of how are we going to make local government more cost effective.
Right.
And this is tying into again another one of our themes of how do we do consolidation? Where do we find the funding cuts ourselves? Because if these issues are impacting our neighboring communities, they're going to impact us as well.
Well, but there's another way to look at that, which is we went, when this mayor and board did the silly thing of appointing a paid chief and all the volunteers left, went to the town of Marian. At that time, we were relying for mutual aid. First call was town of Marian. Town of Marian
Right.
and Larchmont worked together in tandem. When the village of Larchmont got a paid chief and all volunteers left, then all of a sudden the allegiance turned to where the union is strongest, which is over in New Rochelle. You rely on them for mutual aid, to
Right.
the exclusion of the town of Marian.
Who is
Well, what-
closest, right?
Closer and more experienced and
And knows our streets
Yeah, I
better
mean,
and everything
we
because
lived
we're
with them
part
for
of
100
them.
years,
Yeah.
exactly right.
Right.
So the switch over to New Rochelle was, oh, what a great idea. There'll be more professionals. A bunch of baloney. But now you see what actually happens to paid staffs, which is they actually shrink and grow. They shrink and grow. They shrink and grow, depending on the business cycle and what people can afford or not afford, as contrasted to volunteers in the town who are volunteers because they don't get paid, right? And
Right.
shrinking budgets don't have the same sort of impact. You don't have to lay off 10% of your volunteer force
Right.
if you have to shrink your fire department budget. And so you see another disadvantage of having made that foolish switch from the town of
Right.
Mamaroneck as the first mutual aid call to the city of New Rochelle.
And I'm looking at it as we need to accelerate our program of how to continue looking at the cycle for consolidation with the town.
Is anything happening on that?
Not that I know of, not yet. They appointed that committee, in the beginning of the summer?
Yeah, well,
Haven't heard anything yet back.
Well, if they had anything to say that they wanted to applaud themselves for, you'd have heard about it.
Now.
Well, I'll repeat what I said in the last budget cycle. Now that it's the town budget cycle, I think, it'll be ours right after the town is done. It's to the case of you need to set your budget cycle and then figure out the plans to hit those budgets. Put in a 15% reduction across the board, then figure out how you're going to hit it.
Right.
Well,
It will kickstart you into figuring out where the money's going to come from.
well, there's, the pension thing, this really sort of segues into
Okay.
the pension discussion. When the village board in Larchmont passed its tax increase last year, which was, I've forgotten what it was, 5.1% or 4.9% or whatever the wacky number was. We
Right.
said at that time, and this was just into the March, if you will, bottom in the stock market and in the financial business, we pointed out at that time that with the market having declined in value as seriously as it did, that the state controller, sooner or later, was going to do what he did back when I was mayor in 2003, which was right after the 2001
2002.
death,
Right.
2001, 2002 death of the new issue market in the technology stocks. You're going to have to make up the losses.
Right.
And he sent us bills in those days that were astounding. And I can't remember what it was, but I think we went from $50,000 a year in pension contributions up to something like $1 million by the time I left office,
Right.
which causes tax increases that are very difficult to handle. And we said when the village board passed this 5.1% budget and the inflation rate was whatever it was, 1.8%, we said, this is out of whack, and you all are going to have to pay for this. Now we have the headline in the silly journal news. Picture? Can we get the picture? Hike in pension costs near. There we go. Beautiful. Hike in pension costs near. And the newspaper report, for whatever this is worth, the newspaper reports that the percentage of payroll that will have to be contributed by way of increased pension cost, this year's base rate, next year's different rate. For the non-police and fire pension, the rate is going to go from 7.4% of payroll to 11.5% of payroll, which is an increase of 50-something percent.
Wow.
For non-police
Right.
and fire. That's DPW, village office staff, water department, and others who are not police and fire, library. And then for the police department, police and fire pension, the contribution is going to go from 15.1% of payroll annually to 18.4%. At least 18.4%. So that's an increase of, 2.5%, 2.7%, some number like that. And if you apply those to the village payroll, two increases of
Right.
this sort, with this sort of disparity to the appropriate proportions of police and fire and then DPW and village office staff, I think we calculated before the show went on, we're going to be at over 3% tax increase in the village, just to keep up with the state controller's funding requirements for making up the losses in the pension fund. Now, I don't know what this village board is going to do or not do, but last year when they put in a 5.1% increase and the inflation rate was 1 and 1.5%,
Right.
very low, right?
Right.
In February and March, everybody was talking about big dips in expense rates. You come out, if they were to continue with that 5, you come out somewhere over 8%. And I don't know what adjustments they're going to make, and I'm not predicting that they won't make any adjustments, although it's possible.
Right.
The point was, at that time, they weren't telling us the truth about what was going to happen, what had to happen to the pension fund, and what it's now happened. And 3% would be the low end of this number, but the at least kind of, whenever somebody in the government says at least something, you got to worry about what it's really going to be. It isn't going to be any lower, that's for
But
sure.
then the police contract also means that they're getting more for pensions, right?
Absolutely, because they got huge raises, and
Right.
they got one-time payments, and they got all kinds of stuff.
Yeah, the pension.
And the giveaway sweetheart contract that this mayor and board entered into in whatever it was this spring gave back all the things that we managed to hold tight for 15 years that I served, and with the board members that I served with. It was a collective effort to keep it tight, sort of sprung open like a little fire hydrant that had lost its cap and just gushing money up into the air. So you're right. The numbers could be skewed because of the increases that they're getting.
Right.
The pension system, everyone has to realize is above and beyond the salary costs. So every time we change the salary lines, we then have to factor in, above that, the pension.
35%.
Pension's going to go on top of that.
Pension, medical.
And we haven't even talked about the medical benefits and the cost changes to medical care will go. We know we're going to get hit with that again. So, that's what the segue is on why consolidation, one of the reasons consolidation is going to be so important is how to get a handle on your personnel costs.
Well, and put it back into a perspective that's livable. People talk about affordable housing. I've said this 1,000 times. There's nothing in Larchmont that's affordable. If the new requirement under the consent decree that the county has not yet, I guess the county legislature has not yet signed off on,
Right.
requires more inexpensive, I'm going to call it affordable, housing in Larchmont, that means that the bills for that come over onto the rest of us as well. And we're not talking about reasonable rates right now. When you tell people what you pay in taxes, when I do,
Yeah.
with relatives who come from out of town or people
They're
who live out of
impressed,
town.
right? They're really glad they don't live
exactly
here.
Right. Are you kidding me? What, you guys are crazy.
Yeah.
We have a $15.5 million general fund, I believe.
Yeah, 15.5 I think was the
And
general
we have
fund
what, 5,500 residents?
6,500 residents.
No.
Yeah, 65.
So you can figure out the math. It's you're paying what, $3,000 a resident almost for services.
Yeah, which includes kids, dogs. In the count, kids, dogs, parakeets, cats.
So I think people have to it's
Not affordable.
Look at the value proposition. Is it affordable? And we haven't even tackled the school budgets or anything else, which, as we know, unfortunately, is even a higher proportion of our taxes than the village budget.
But the school board was somewhat responsive to the hue and cry in April and May of last year, yes? Didn't they originally propose something that was a significantly higher number than what they wound up with?
Well, it was voted down.
Right.
The bond was voted down, so that's
guess
because the
you're right.
people have some control there. The only control here is to go to a board meeting, which I wish more people did, but to go to a board meeting and let the board know how you feel.
No. The better control
Yes.
is change the state law so that you get to vote on the municipal budget every year,
Oh, as we do on the
as
school
you do
budget.
on the school budget.
I think
Make your case. If you got a case for why the budget should be X, Y, Z, go out and make it. If you don't, the budget won't pass, and you'll have to go back to the drawing boards. There is something to be said for that.
And villages are different than towns. If you look at towns, they have to go out for election on their bond appropriations.
So do we. On a permissive referendum, every single bond. Did they just pass a bond in Larchmont for
They just passed a bond.
$2.9 million? Whatever it was, $2.3 million?
2.3, I think.
Some large number to accommodate all the trucks and other equipment that they bought, plus money that they invested in Flint Park. Remember, they were over budget by $300,000, and they did a bond anticipation note, something. It was in May or June. Yeah. So you go out and you bond that stuff, and that all adds to our debt service burden. But at the end of the day, you can, I'm trying to remember what it is, 10% of the registered voters with a petition, you can actually have a vote on a bond, on whether the bond is gonna actually go out. They can't go out for 30 days. After they resolve,
Oh.
it has a 30 or 35-day waiting period, and then you can come in with a petition and have a permissive referendum. That would be a fun thing to do. Anybody out there who wants to do something fun, get 100 signatures or whatever the number is. Yeah, exactly right, and make a difference.
You think it only would be 100?
No, I don't know what the number was. What number did we have for the
It was a couple hundred.
for the fire department? Fire department, we had we had huge numbers.
But if you
Look
take
at where that got us.
Well,
if you're taking a look at where some of Larchmont's perceived costs are going to be, as part of building that field, we have to put in 35 units of affordable housing.
yeah, everybody thought that was a joke. They laughed it off. Remember when they were talking about it initially, they tried to low-key that discussion.
But looking at
it will never happen.
Look, what is it, 2011 we have to have it done?
12, I think.
12?
Yeah.
I'm just looking at the cost because the Esposito project that made the news, for not being done, has some reasonable handles on what the cost is. The land for that was going to be $2.5 million floor price for the auction. Then on top of that, you have to add a building.
Describe the land.
The land that we're talking about is right next to the railroad tracks, right behind the Texaco station, near the laundromat.
So it's not particularly desirable,
It's not
and it's
particularly-
still $2.5 million.
For an acre and a half?
For an acre and a half
So
of
it's
land.
1.8 million or so, roughly, for an acre
And
of
you know,
undesirable land.
and then on top of that, you're going to have to build a building that can accommodate 35 units of affordable housing for families. So we're not talking studio apartments.
Oh, okay.
How many units are there in the Marian Town Housing Authority system?
I was going to look that up. I didn't.
Yeah, I wonder how many there are. I mean, it could be as big. Well, there were supposed to be 45 or 40 apartment units in the in that property,
In
right?
the Esposito, and
In
that
the
was going to
Esposito.
be 2 3-story buildings.
Yeah, so that's what you're talking about, basically, a little smaller than that.
A little smaller.
Well, but the thing is that the whole field thing and the agreement for building the housing was under Mayor Feld's watch,
Yeah.
and she's done nothing about it. I mean, that's what gets me, that people just figure, okay, it's not going to be my problem when I have to produce. You know, it's someone else's problem.
Yeah. That's an old politician dodge, right? We'll put this into play, and then somebody
Then,
else will have to worry about it.
yeah.
But here's an interesting thing: my recollection of that whole dispute, and there was it went on for 6 months about whether to put in this turf field in Flint Park, take the money from the county to do it, and then what else did you have to agree to?
Oh, yes, we
Right?
did have to agree to things.
That was way hidden. One of those was 35 units of whatever it is,
Affordable
workforce
housing.
or affordable housing, whatever you want to call it.
Workforce housing.
The other was taking over with 1.1 miles of Palmer Avenue, and the maintenance and repaving responsibilities and all that went with that. And my recollection is that one of the trustees said that was a no-brainer.
Yes,
To
exactly.
take over Palmer Avenue was a no-brainer. And boy, we had looked at the numbers when I was mayor, and it was a nightmare. When you're looking off, I don't know, doing it every 15 or 20 years, it's got a lot of truck traffic. It has a lot of traffic. It's a very wide street. It's 6 lanes, right? 2 driving lanes and 1 parking lane on
Right.
each side. So for the most part, not entirely, but for the most part. And so you really were going to have a huge amount of responsibility. And now we're still at $70 a barrel. Who knows where we're going to wind up? And that directly affects the price of asphalt, to the point where Mike pointed this out on the train on the way up here tonight. The only thing that he can tell that the village did by way of repaving this year is 1 street. Well, hell, we used to do streets all over the place. We did Stuyvesant one year. Stuyvesant probably a mile.
Right.
And this was 1 street, Hall Avenue. And, that's, speak of your shrinking paving dollar. So, we just bond it. That's, the old saw, we'll just bond it, we'll just bond it, we'll just bond it. Well, if you look at our financials
So
now.
our deficits will be huge,
Yeah,
too.
if you look at our financials now, I just did this a few minutes ago. It's like we owe $7 million in borrowed money.
And the thing with, we have 27 miles of street approximately.
Right.
If you sit
I'll
there
find it.
and you say, a street lasts about 25 years between pavings,
Right.
that assumes that you're going to pave 1 mile of street per year.
Right. And that's what was being done, I
That was,
believe.
well, we were actually, we were migrating ourselves up to that line to get to that paving budget. We were working hard on that. But we need to do that because, as we know, the streets will get in very disrepair as we cut holes in them to fix the pipes underneath them, to
Oh.
change people's connections. People have their sewer lines that have to get made, and you put a patch in the street. The patch doesn't last as long, and that's what starts the streets degrading. And we can't have very bad finished surfaces if we want our children riding bicycles on them and everything else.
Right, right. Well,
You
the
know-
scooters now, because those are less stable than bicycles, aren't they?
The whole
Yes.
it's part of the whole quality of life issues. And one of the big complaints I always hear is people say my street is terrible.
I don't know how they decided it was Hall Avenue this year. Remember the old way that we did it was the DPW guys figured out what the worst streets were. They came in with a list, told you how many roughly square feet each street needed to be repaved, and then they did their guesstimate based on sort of probing around with the contractors on what it might cost per square foot. And then they took the top 3 or whatever the budget amount,
Right.
the top 5 or the top 7 or the top 2, depending on how much was going to be done. And that was the system. I don't know what system they used this year, but if they're thinking that Hall Avenue was the worst street in the village, I can't imagine that. All you got to do is walk down Prospect, by way of example, and or ride your bicycle down Prospect, and it's a disaster. It's a nightmare.
There are many streets like that.
Yeah, just a nightmare. Now, that happens to be close to home, and I ride the bicycle with Kelsey all the time on that, but there are a lot of streets like that, over in Pinebrook as well.
You know, and I'm looking at, plenty of streets that I run on the manor. So I think it's all these issues, on not just our streets, our other infrastructure items. We were talking about the water mains, which is still an ongoing project. It was an emergency project 4 years ago. 4 years later.
In the campaign in 2006, it was an hysterical emergency project. I can't believe they didn't pay any attention to it, said them. And now it's 4 years later, and oh gee whiz, it still isn't fixed. What an emergency that was. Yeah, this is going across the bridge.
Oh, yeah, I thought
we
that was an
spent-
emergency.
Yeah, wow, hysterical.
We did all kinds of, they did engineering studies that bypassed the standard bidding process as part of the Emergency Bond
It's
Act.
an emergency.
So,
Well, I guess what bothers me is I don't get a sense that anyone's trying to budget anything, that it's just, oh, there's this expense, that expense, and it's like they think they're not going to be living here in 20 years and having to be paying these taxes, and it's...
I would say that's a sure bet.
and they're not planning. You used to have the budget committee.
Yeah, I don't know
They reworked it. I think one of the prime avenues of a budget committee like that is to start figuring out what your capital expenditures are going to look like, and how you're going to
Right.
how
I ran into a fellow who was appointed by the current administration to the whatever it is budget committee, whatever they replaced the real budget committee with, and this was last October. He said that was his first meeting. His very first meeting was just before last November's election. Remember when the mayor was running for state
Right,
senate against Susie
right.
Oppenheimer? He said that was his very first
You
meeting.
mean they hadn't met at all?
Well, I don't know. Maybe who knows? Maybe
Yeah.
there was, who knows what happened? I don't pretend to know, but
Yeah.
if it's true that was their first meeting, that will explain to you why there isn't a lot of pressure to keep the budget under control, which is the only way it happens.
Well, and the problem now, of course, is that things are just starting to fall apart at the municipal level in terms of lower revenues from the recession and people losing jobs.
You mean like the state budget filling the budget gap with $5.6 billion of federal stimulus money that will not be there next
Oh,
year?
I feel like I want to go shoot myself.
How are they going to do it?
We've got to end this.
We're going to end it. We'll be back next time.
Well, let's have a joke for the end of next time, okay? Well, thank you very much to our wonderful crew at LMC-TV, and take care, and go Yankees. Thank you.
Mike, are you going to say anything about Go Mets?
not this year.
Good night.
Thank you.